this is Sam Moore, who's a chapter in my book, and Dave Crater, who is no longer with us. And so maybe you'll remember this. Can you hear it back there? Higher? No, it's okay. All right, it's okay. I think it should be louder. That's cool. So when I interviewed Sam Moore, he told me, you know, other duos like the Righteous Brothers or James and Bobby Purified, they sang harmony, but what Sam and Dave did is he said call and response. We didn't harmonize. He said, for one thing, we didn't have time to practice. Dave had two jobs trying to make a living, so he said, we got that call and response from the black church, right? So like the preacher and the congregation. So I had a very interesting talk with him about singing, and he's a long chapter in my book. So, I never thought about it when I was listening to them, like, well, what does the sunshine refer to? It turns out it's Florida. They're from Miami. But I don't know, it never occurred to me. So, does everybody remember who this gentleman is here, the host?
Burgers?
Huh? I think it's Mike Douglas. So, this is, you know, an interracial, multi-ethnic band out of Miami. I interviewed Harry Wayne Casey, who is KC. So he's a chapter in the book, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. So at this point, I'm starting to realize that maybe I'm onto something, right? Ray Charles, Sam and David Casey, the Royals Florida acts. If you just put those people together, you've really got something. Now, Gainesville figures very prominently in this soul history and in my book. Here is an early Jake Mitchell with his doo-wop vocal group, the Blenders. And they were Gainesville, I think in high school, if I'm not wrong, Jake?
Right.
Right?
Right.
So this would be about 1960, maybe?
6 years.
Not to date you.
That's 50 years around. Who's the first African American?
I'll get to that, yes. So, Jake, although he originally is a Tampa native, probably had his first success singing in contests that were put on by Wholesome Bread, a bread company in Tampa. So, Jake, tell them what you won.
Bread.
Well, what's wrong with that? Right. And then he was such a prodigy that the great blues musician B.B. King took him under his wing and took him on the road. He later went on to record probably his greatest hits with Impact Records in Detroit. There's the one I like called Nomad Woman, and another one called I Got to Know, and then probably his greatest, the best known song that he reprised recently called Not a Chance in a Million. I have no doubt that they will play that tomorrow night at Depot Park at 8 o'clock, so hope you come out and check it out. So that's one important soul artist from this area. There's another gentleman who just passed recently named Lavelle Kama, and he was a veteran of the Chitlin Circuit, which is what they call the string of black entertainment venues during the era of segregation, where black entertainers performed for almost exclusively black audiences. He was on the road with a review, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. This is him fairly recently when he was living in Gainesville. And this gentleman right here on baritone looks a lot like Charlie Blake today. Am I right? Yeah, okay. So, there's a chapter about Lavelle Kama, which talks about the Chitlin Circuit and both the joys and the trials of tribulations during the era of segregation. And a lot of travel and a lot of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and potted meat sandwiches, but also the joy of performing every night for very, very receptive audiences. Another woman who grew up outside of Gainesville had a big hit on Stax Records in 1968 that you might recognize. It was also covered in the 1990s by En Vogue. Catchy refrain. That was written by Dave Crawford, and I think partly by Linda. A lot of it was improvised, she told me. So she's a chapter in the book, and this is her back in the day. She is one of the rare white performers who succeeded on the black Chitlin Circuit, and she was quite a rarity there. She worked with Mr. Kama, who I just showed you before this, and also Charles Stedham worked with her in Lavelle Kama. And she was a great talent, and she's a chapter in the book, and it had a very different dynamic based on race. Right? Now, one of my next discoveries, this isn't in Gainesville, we're going back to where I am living in Tampa. Do you remember the song and the dance, The Twist? I know some of you might. It's probably the biggest song and dance craze of my lifetime. You know, JFK and Jackie Kennedy were twisting in the White House. They were twisting in the Soviet Union. I mean, it was tremendous. And that trend was based on this guy who went by Chubby Checker, who made this recording in Philadelphia, and then Dick Clark, who had the show American Bandstand, had him on a few times. And it was one of the very few songs that reached the #1 spot on the Billboard sales charts twice, at 2 different times. But as it turns out, he didn't write that song. That song was written by Hank Ballard of Hank Ballard and the Midnighters. And he was from Detroit, but he spent a lot of time in Florida. And at one point, he was in Tampa, and he was on Central Avenue here, which is the heart of the black neighborhood then, the Harlem of Tampa. You can see here, there's something called the Cotton Club. So a lot of the nightclubs were named in the South after the ones that they were revered in Harlem, in New York City. The Apollo, the Savoy, and here's the Cotton Club. So Hank Ballard was there in about 1958, 59, and he saw some teenagers on Central Avenue doing this crazy little dance. And he asked them, they were kind of swiveling their hips. And he asked them what they were doing, and they said, well, this is a little thing we made up, and we call it The Twist. So he wrote the song, and he immediately went to Miami and recorded it for Henry Stone, who was a big-time producer down there. But as it turned out, he had no business recording for Henry Stone because he was under contract to King Records in Cincinnati, so they didn't release it. but he did put it out on King Records. It was a minor hit on the rhythm and blues charts. And at that time, things were still pretty segregated. Black music was on the R&B charts, and formerly called race records. And then white music was the Hot 100, the pop. And Chubby Checker crossed over and did both. So, but after he, Chubby Checker was commissioned by Dick Clark to do a word-for-word, note-for-note copy of Hank Ballard's original Twist, and then it exploded, worldwide. But here's the original. He did. At least in theory, he had the songwriting rights, and he got paid every time Chubby Checker's song was played, which was many. So he did make some money off of it. He just didn't get the fame. And, now, there were plenty of times when it was played illegally and he didn't get the royalties, but he did get a fair amount. So I did some research on that, and that urban legend in Tampa turns out to be true. So that's a chapter in the book. So now, in the aggregate, to review, as we say in academia, we've got Ray Charles, Tim and Dave, Jake Mitchell, and The Twist, all coming from Florida. So now, does anybody remember this duo, what their big song